Alright, ladies and gentlemen, with the release of Castris and Anaxa in 3.2, two very strong units who have shaken up the meta a decent bit, I figured what better time to update our tier list than right now. As you can see right now on screen is the tier list we had from last time with Castris and Anaxa here at the bottom since they have not yet been added. Now for those of you who don't know how I rank characters, this is a free-to-play tier list, so this is E0S0 considering their best in slot team. If their best in slot team is expensive, they won't be penalized for it, but if their best in slot team isn't expensive, then they might even be rewarded for it, potentially. So characters who are dependent on their supports having high eidolons will not be getting an advantage here. The entire team has to be E0S0, even if it's using all 5 stars. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to first of all take a look at all of our character placements, mainly down here at the bottom, and then the main emphasis is going to be on the top of this tier list here, I'd say in about the top 3 tiers, since I do think we have seen a fair bit of shake-up with Anaxa and Castris. But real quick, if you want to pick up any version 3 units, then be sure to use the sponsor of today's video, lootbar.gg. You can use Lootbar to top up in your favorite games like Honkai or Genshin Impact and save up to 25%. Lootbar leverages favorable exchange rates and uses Hoyoverse partner ads, so you can get the most affordable prices and enjoy all Hoyoverse top-up bonuses as well. And with the top-up bonus reset in 3.2's anniversary, this means that you can get double the generic shards with your first purchase on Lootbar. Transactions on Lootbar are also simple, safe and secure, as you only need to enter your UID and your region in order to get fast delivery. For example, if I want to buy the 3,280 generic shards, all I have to do is go down here, enter in my UID, as well as my server region, and then go to top up now, and they typically arrive in less than a minute, and you can get double for your first time purchase thanks to the anniversary. And creators like Raiden Shotgun, To That Time, and Mordex Tryharder are all also collaborating with Lootbar, so they are trustworthy, and they also have some very good reviews on Trustpilot, and I just use them myself so I can vouch for the authenticity, speed, and security. New users can also get an extra 10% off, so be sure to check out Lootbar with the link in the description. Thank you to Lootbar, and back to the video. Alright, well then, so I want to start off by talking about the characters in the bottom 3 tiers, because I don't really think they've been affected that much by any of the movements in the top 4 tiers. And we're going to be talking about whether they should go up or go down. Yanqing, still the worst DPS in the game, no changes whatsoever, F tier. Zila, although you can get some of her eidolons here, which we could technically consider because you can get them from losing a 50-50 now. I don't think they make that much of a change, especially considering the fact that Castris is just a much better quantum DPS right now. So I don't see her placement changing anytime soon, especially with HP inflation. Jingliu also just gets outshone by otherwise characters. For example, I've seen people get better results with Misha than I have with Jingliu. Of course, Herta in Pure Fiction is very strong, and then D Herta is just much stronger than Jingliu in all 3 endgame modes. Although I do actually think we can move Blade up 1 tier. Now you guys might be saying biased because I'm a Blade main, but you know what, it's my tier list. And then I'm also going to be putting Doctor Ratio down. The reason being is that now we just have so many imaginary DPS. Mighty and Rapper are 2 very strong imaginary DPS characters, and then Dill is also a competitor, so I really don't think that ratio is doing too hot right now. His best in slot teams are really expensive. He really values getting like an S1 Topaz or an E1S1 Topaz, for example. If you don't, then you have to, then E0S0 Topaz doesn't feel that fluid, and then also someone like Jiacho, you know, is decent but not ideal for him, and also he's very single target, and as we all know, the meta has gone more and more AoE in recent times, so I don't think he really suits the current meta right now. And although I think back in the day he was stronger than Dill, like let's say early version 2, I don't think that holds up nowadays. And then as for Blade, you know, nowadays you can actually play him in double DPS teams with Castris, which is he best in slot? No. But I actually think there's a pretty good use case for him in dual DPS teams where the enemy is weak to both wind and quantum, especially in Epoch Shadow. He's very good against Hulia right now because, you know, when you don't have the wind when you have the wind weakness and the quantum weakness, you can deal some damage to Blade, and he also does very good generation for Castris' stacks, which is why I actually think he does have a use nowadays, whereas the D tier are characters who don't really have a use. Dill is just a slightly better character than Dr. Ratio nowadays. Like I've touched, you know, he's got blast attacks rather than single target, so he isn't as locked in as Dr. Ratio. Kafka, you can still use it sometimes. It does get, you know, buffs sometimes in the Apex Shadow and Memory of Chaos rotation, so you know, it's decent. And then Clara is just kind of a worse version of Yun Li, but there aren't all that many enemies right now who attack a bunch. Other than Hule in Apex Shadow right now, but even then you have better options against him. But you know, enemies like Nikador as well as Flame Reaver don't do that many attacks, so you don't actually get that many counter attacks, so I don't think they're doing too hot right now. But after touching on the bottom 3 tiers, I actually think this is where where we have to place Castris and Anexa, because they have brought in some changes to the meta. So if I just bring them up here in the middle, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone that Castris is going in the SS tier. She's very good in all endgame modes, especially Memory of Chaos and Pure Fiction, but she's also pretty damn good in it. She's just good in every single endgame mode, if I'm being entirely honest. She also has a decent amount of team options as well. Also, you don't need all 5 stars for her best in slot teams, which makes her even stronger. You also have some dual DPS variants. On top of all the great damage, it is just insane. I do think her and the Herta are locked in for the top 2 DPS in the game right now. Personally, I'd maybe go with Castris over Herta, especially maybe after Hyacinth releases, although I do still think that right now there is an argument between the two. And now Anexa is another character where I have seen a decent amount of discussion on his power level, which is a bit complicated because he is both a main DPS as well as a sub DPS. And since both are technically DPS roles, I do actually want to consider both of them here. And despite what some people are saying, I'm still going to put Anexa in the SS tier. I do still think he's a top tier character in the game. And me personally, I would actually move Aglaya and Rapper down. We will be moving more characters down from the S tier right now, but I do just want to talk about the SS tier right now. Like I said, I do think Castris and the Herta are locked in for this top tier, and then it's probably between Mighty and Anexa for your second option. Both can be played as a main DPS on their own, or sub DPS in Castris and Herta teams respectively. The question is, which one do you think is better? I do think Mighty has better solo damage, but when it comes to their team synergy, I do think Anexa synergizes more with Herta than Mighty does with Castris. So, I do think it's up in the air. If you want to argue that only one of these should be in the SS tier, that's where I think it depends whether you think Herta or Castris is better. If you think Castris is better, then you should go for Mighty. If you think Herta is better, then you should go for Anexa. Or if you want to debate how strong they are as a solo DPS, then Mighty would be above Anexa. But just because of, I do think Anexa is the most flexible DPS around these levels, so that is why I also think he should be considered an SS tier unit. The Castris Mighty team might get stronger after Hyacinth's release. We'll have to wait and see for that. But I do think for the time being, we can justify 4 DPS in the SS tier. I used to go by the saying of there should only be 3 in the SS tier for the top 3. However, with just how many DPS characters we have in the game right now, I mean, just look at this. It's absolutely insane. I do think it's justifiable to have 4 in the SS tier. But as I'm saying, if you want to have only 3, then I'd probably put Anexa down and have this as my top 3. But now when it comes to the characters we have moved down, Aglaya, although she is very strong, especially in her best in slot team, I don't think that she quite is able to get up there with Castris and the Herta, although she is very good. I just feel like those are on a slightly other level. And then the problem is she's also very, very rigid, both in her teammate options as well as in her team archetypes. She's only a main DPS, which, there's nothing wrong with that. But right now, I don't feel like, I don't quite feel like she belongs in the SS tier. Although her damage numbers are definitely in the SS tier, it's, making sure you can activate all that damage, the consistency, that's what does kind of bring her down slightly for me. She's very close to the SS tier, I would say. Her solo damage is probably higher, is definitely higher than the Nexus, and maybe even higher than Mighty's. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not exactly an expert on Aglaya, but that's just my personal thoughts on her. You can let me know what you think down below. For Rapper, I do think she is currently still the best super breaker in the game. We do still have quite a lot of imaginary weakness because we, of course, Mighty just released, so they are still releasing quite a few imaginary weak enemies. And of course, with how massive AoE attacks are in the meta right now, Castris is technically an AoE attacker. Her 2 biggest hits, both the dragon as well as her enhanced skill, are both AoE attacks. The Herta, of course, one of the flagship characters of this unit, is an erudition unit, so there is a lot of AoE, which is why I think Rapper right now works as the best super breaker in the game. And now is where we get into a slightly interesting discussion, in that it's our all top 3 DPS, Acheron, Feixiao, and Firefly. How the mighty have fallen, some might say. Now the thing is, I think at least one of these guys, if not 2, has to go down. And if I'm going to pick one to stay up, I'm probably going to say it's Acheron, because she's probably the best across all 3 endgame modes. She's decent in Pure Fiction, Memory of Curse, and Apex Shadow. She's not going to give you like an insane clear at E0S0 on any of those sides. But if you do have her best in slot team, also the fact that Pela is still one of her best partners, and Gallagher is a decent support as well, I do think Acheron just about edges it out. You know, you can have Acheron on one of your sides and then have a stronger second side on all 3 endgame modes, whereas Fei Xiao and Firefly, they're not really that great in Pure Fiction. You're better off using Ling Xiao main DPS in Pure Fiction sometimes than Fire Weakening, so I'm not gonna lie. So I do think Acheron should be staying here. And then the question is, do I want to move Fei Xiao and Firefly down, or just one of them? Now, when it comes to the one I'm probably going to move down 100%, I'm not gonna lie, that's probably gonna have to be Firefly. Rappa is a AoE super breaker, so she's kind of taken Firefly's role. Like I said, you won't really play her in Pure Fiction. When it comes to Memory of Chaos and Apex Shadow as well, I do think she's been struggling slightly more. Especially thanks to the erudition meta as well, and the fact that you can only fire implant one enemy. If you could fire implant on 3, then I actually think she'd be doing better. But I do think that Firefly has been suffering slightly lately, so I hate putting her down in a back-to-back tier list. But there's just so many DPS characters right now that I feel like we kind of have to. Although, to be fair to her, what I actually kind of want to do here is I actually want to rework our tier list slightly here. I think if I just bump up all the colors by 1, I didn't think I was going to do this, but I probably have to, because looking at it, there is a bit of a tier gap between certain units, I think. So I am actually going to make, oh, I did not mean to do that. I'm actually going to make an A tier here, and this is, where have I messed up here? Okay, never mind. This is going to have to become the B tier. This is going to have to become the C tier, because I'm looking at 2 characters here, kind of in that middle tier, which don't really belong. And what we're going to do here is, I think Jade definitely can stay here, but I do think that Jingyuan, Butil, and Yunli should be in the B tier right now, whereas Himiko and Argenti should be in the C tier, because I do feel like there is a bit of a gap between these units, as well as the gap between these units. Like, these are still more usable, especially in, you know, Pure Fiction for Himiko. I don't think Super Break Himiko is a thing nowadays, I'm not gonna lie. But, you know, still some use in Pure Fiction, and then Argenti can also get use in Pure Fiction as well. And then can be a secondary DPS in Herta teams, but you're better off using 4-stars like Saval in most game modes, and then Herta is also very good in Pure Fiction. So, yeah, now the question is, do I think Fei Xiao is on the same tier as Aglaya, Rappa, and Acheron? Again, she's not all that great in Pure Fiction, and at the same time, when it comes to her Apex Shadow performance, although she's normally at least decent on one Apex Shadow side, that's not guaranteed, especially considering the fact that, of course, we have shifted to more of an AoE meta right now. Could she receive more support to help her out? Yes. Do I think right now that she's in the best spot? I mean, in Memory of Chaos, there's also a lot more AoE units like Flame Reaver. You have to attack the summons as well. Nikado, you have to attack the totems. You know, even on the Kafka side, you've got 3 enemies, you know, so blast attackers are quite favored. I'm really torn on Fei Xiao. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think as a unit, she's really, really strong, but she's kind of suffering from circumstance right now. Oh, this is really rough. Okay, I think the SS tier are units who destroy all 3 endgame modes. Aglaya, Rappa, and Acheron all do good to decent in all 3 endgame modes, whereas the A tier characters are ones that do good to decent in 2 endgame modes, but might struggle in 1. And then the B tier are just, you know, decent characters. C are your slightly below average characters. I'd say D tier are your not great characters, and then F are your characters which don't really have many. Sorry, F. Wait, this should be E tier. Wait, sorry. E tier should be your characters which don't really have many use cases, and then F tier is the character who has no uses in the entire game whatsoever. If you are using him, what the heck are you doing? That's the way I see things. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. What is your ranking? You know, just to kind of consolidate my rankings, like I said, I do think these are definitely the top 2 DPS, and then there is a discussion of you should put Mighty or a Nexa higher. Personally, I would put Mighty, so you can technically do this, and then I think this is also a very valid tier list, although personally, because of his flexibility as both a main and sub DPS, I do want to put a Nexa in the SS tier. Aglaya can be argued to be in the SS tier more so than these 2. I do think she is definitely a decent bit better than these two. The problem is I don't think that she's quite in there, especially because she's much more of a rigid unit, and because of her rigidity, even though she can output very high DPS numbers, I still think she's slightly below them. Also, enemies like Mighty, you know, deal a lot of take a lot of turns, a lot of actions, a lot of damage. Aglaya is just, you know, definitely, I do think some people get baited just by seeing one massive number. So yeah, that's why personally, although I do think Aglaya is very, very good and she is a top 5 DPS, for me, she just slightly misses out on the SST, like the rigidity, like I said. Rapper, like I said, probably best super breaker in the game. AoE as well, so you know, she definitely deserves the S there. And then I think Acheron is just barely clinging on thanks to her use in all 3 endgame modes and the fact that she's still pretty decent. Firefly, still good unit. Facial, still good unit. Jade, slightly more niche unit, but still very good. She will destroy one side of Purification for you. And then in Apex Shadow and Memory of Chaos, if you have the Herta, she's a decent option for her, although Anexa is arguably better. And, well, sorry, Anexa is definitely better, and then some people even rather use Seval. So is Jade fully worth your pulls? I'm not too sure, but if you like her, she's still a very strong pull, which, you know, and I do think she's gotten a massive upgrade than from where she used to be. Like I said, Fei Xiao and Firefly kind of suffering from circumstance. Fei Xiao needs less of an AoE meta. Firefly needs, I think, just a slight tweak to make it so that her implant can hit 3 enemies, because then that will not only make her weakness break more enemies in AoE, but it will also help enable characters like Linkshao more. Linkshao, if it wasn't for Linkshao, I do think a Firefly would have fallen off much more nowadays. So yeah, that's why I think she's in the A tier. Jingyuan, Brutal, Yunli, all decent DPS, although they're not really the best at anything. And then I've already given my thoughts on the rest of the characters in decent detail. Me personally, I'm quite happy with this tier list. This definitely reflects my views. I think this is how I currently see all these units in the game. Let me know your personal thoughts. What would you change? Do try to keep a discussion civil, but hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. See ya.